Okay. Yes. Hello, everybody. Welcome to my workshop and presentation, PCA Cheer for Life, Cheer with Pride, a social identity approach to charitable cheerleading and community development. My name is Dirk Smith. I am part of... Hello, everybody. My name is Dirk Smith. Hi, everybody. Thanks you for joining and watching my workshop and presentation, PCA, Cheer for Life, Cheer with Pride, a social identity approach to charitable cheerleading and community development. For this workshop, we're going to cover a few different things, especially in relation to the role of PCA and charitable cheerleading as it enhances your own individual's identity, how your own social identity connects with your community, and how the organizations like PCA can have an impact and influence on not only your social identity, but the social identity of the people around you and the community and everything like this. If you have not already seen my episode of Sports Like and Stuff on social identity in sport that I filmed last year at the Sin City Classic with PCA, I highly recommend you check that out because a lot of the information is very similar, if not the same. But in this presentation, we're going to unpack it a little more. However, you do not need to watch it in order to understand anything here. It's just a nice extra way to add a little more information to your toolbox and knowledge base. For the workshop and plan, as well as our goals, we're going to cover a few different things. We're going to start with who and what is Pride Cheerleading Association? What communities does PCI identify with? We're going to talk about the individual to the community and back. We're going to talk about social identity theory and self-categorization theory. We also are going to examine 4 key takeaways to social identity in sports. And finally, my goal for this presentation is to help you understand your participation in PCA and how that influences not only the organization and the community, but also how PCA also influences the community as well as yourself. By the way, who am I? My name is Dirk Smith. I am a PhD student at the German Sports University in Cologne, Germany, that is. My main research topic is visual motor calibration and motivational climate as a complex system. I have a bachelor's degree in sport and exercise science from the Metropolitan State University of Denver, and a master's degree in sport and exercise psychology from the German Sports University in Cologne. In addition to my PhD studies, I also work for an organization called Compete Sports Diversity as the managing editor and the director of education. With that organization, we do a lot of content in our online blog, as well as an actual printed magazine. And we do various workshops, events, summits, conferences, and things all over the US in regard to sports diversity, promoting diversity, equity, equality, and inclusion in sports, as well as other topics. So I'm sure if you are familiar with me, or I know a lot of you are already familiar with Compete Sports Diversity, our goal there is to unite the LGBT community through sports, which is also part of one of my goals. I also work for an organization called Virtual Sports Psych as their community manager and development leader. For this organization, I do a lot of program development, educational development, and networking with other professional sports psychologists from all around the world. We do a lot of workshops, a lot of trainings, a lot of just finding ways to connect people and bring people together and to help understand how we can grow the field of sports psychology as a whole based on how much we can learn from each other. I also work for a professional soccer club called SC Brule, Sports Club Brule. I'm working as the strength and conditioning coach and the sports psychologist for the senior men's team. Finally, I work for SC Honest, which is the local LGBT sports club here in Cologne, Germany, where I work as both a strength and conditioning coach and the competitive swimming coach as well. My personal goal, especially in regard to all the work that I do with these organizations, as well as being able to do workshops and presentations like this for PCA and all the other work I do, is to help see how I can empower people to express themselves and find community through sport. Just to give you a little background on myself, I was able to find learned a lot about who I am as a person through sports, and being able to take part in different events like gay games and Sin City Classic, and find a sense of community, and all these different things that have had a positive impact on my life, my physical health, my mental health, and my social health, as well as my professional development, and so many other things. So for me, this is the base of my passion, and a lot of that also contributes to my work with not just LGBT sports, but with specific organizations like the ones I listed, plus organizations like PCA, who I know a lot of you are familiar with who I am. I met a lot of you, and we've done a lot of work together, and I'm excited to be able to do this presentation and be able to contribute to the body of knowledge that PCA has and represents to help you be successful even further in the efforts that you do, not only as individuals, but as an organization and community as a whole, because I think it's very important, and I think it's very strong and impactful to help inspire other people to find what works best for them in the same context, if that makes sense. Yeah. All right. So let's get into it. Who and what is the Pride Cheerleading Association? The mission of PCA is to support people living with life-challenging conditions in the LGBT community and beyond. The goal of PCA is to unite, support, and develop the member teams so they thrive in their community efforts. I'm sure all of y'all are very familiar with that. That is the foundation of the Pride Cheerleading Association as a whole. And in my own research, I looked at all the different member teams to see, okay, what are the specific missions and goals of the member teams, which are, as you can imagine, all pretty similar. Maybe some of the wording is a little different, but generally reflecting the LGBTQI community, as well as, charitable cheerleading efforts, raising money to support your own local communities, and to help have a positive impact on different individuals and organizations in ways that you can use cheerleading as the platform to help give back. So when we want to talk about identity, we want to think about what is the identity that Pride Cheerleading Association, as well as the member teams, and ultimately the athletes and the members who make up the organization itself. So, like I said, PCA teams and athletes represent a support network to share resources, experiences, innovations among established and developing LGBTQ community-based cheer teams. This represents an association under which all such cheer teams may assemble during the quadrennial gay games, international LGBTQ and cultural sport event, if you're not familiar with that, as well as other multi-team performance and fundraising events, right? So PCA teams have come together for Sin City Classic, World Pride, different community pride festivals, right? I've seen, PCA teams, from like San Francisco and LA come and attend pride events in, Washington, or, just all the different teams that like to come together, so there's a lot of crossover in the way that the PCA teams all support each other at different events, right? PCA serves as a community partner for the Safe Space Alliance, which is an LGBTQI led plus nonprofit organization that aims to help identify, navigate, and create safe spaces for the LGBTQI community worldwide. So these are the kinds of things that PCA specifically identifies with. And I gleaned all this information from PCA's website. So this is the things that, in terms of identity, PCI is built upon, okay? But when we want to talk about identity, we want to talk about what communities does PCA and its member teams identify with and serve, right? So here's my little little circle map of the different kinds of communities that PCA and the member teams represent, identify with, and work with, okay? You have the LGBTQI community. Member teams are rooted in the LGBTQI community, as well as the athletes. You have athletes who identify as gay, lesbian, bisexual, transgender, non-binary, queer, intersex, all the different letters of the alphabet, all the different colors of the rainbow is an important part of what PCA as a community is identified with, right? You also have the LGBTQI sports community, because cheerleading is a sport, And a lot of the events that PCA supports are sports events specifically targeted for the LGBTQI community. You have the Federation of the Gay Games that was mentioned specifically by PCA as being one of those very specific communities and organizations that PCA identifies with. I don't know if you know this, but a lot of the root of PCA in the history, when it was Cheer San Francisco and stuff like that, was built around participation in the gay games. So historically speaking, PCA identifies with the gay games community. You also have your local communities, right? So the local communities, which are based on the membership of the teams and the athletes within the team. So when I say local community, of course, I talk about like, for example, there's maybe an athlete who specifically identifies as transgender, right? And whatever member team that they're part of. So that member team and that PCA as a whole are specifically identified with the transgender community because of one of their athletes is specifically transgender or gay or lesbian or whatever. So the membership of the individual athletes reflects the identity of the team and the organization as a whole, if that makes sense. So, it could be transgender, it could be non-binary, queer, lesbian, gay, it could be LGBT. Maybe it's a person of color, right? So somebody who's Black, who's Native American, of Asian descent, whatever. If it's a community that individual identifies with, whether it's race, religion, sexual orientation, gender identity, even if it's something, completely something you would not expect, right? Like, as a Star Wars fan, or is also a swimmer or an athlete in another sport, something like that, right? That person's identity reflects the identity of the organization and the team, which in turn also help influence the identity, right? So the membership of each of the membership group or the individual athletes of each organization reflect the identity of those individual athletes and vice versa. If that makes sense. They also have the local communities based on region, right? So for example, Cheer Salt Lake City is obviously identified with Salt Lake City, Utah, and the community that's there, right? So maybe it's predominantly Mormon, but in this case, it would probably be ex-Mormon. But that's reflective of that physical community in Salt Lake City specifically, or Cheer Colorado, or Cheer New York, or whatever, right? So the physical region in which the team and the organization is based on help influences and represents the identity of that organization, and of course the people that are within it as well, right? You also have specifically, like I said, with the Federation of the Gay Games, the Safe Space Alliance, and the PCA specifically identifies with the Safe Space Alliance in that same regard as well. So their active involvement with that organization specifically also represents the identity of the PCA as a whole, and then the member teams. And of course, you got the cheerleading community, right? Because it is a cheerleading association, and the organizations and member teams are usually made up of cheerleaders. So, a lot of the athletes with PCA are athletes who went to high school and college and did cheerleading in those times in their life, but not everybody, right? So, maybe some people didn't even start cheerleading until they learned about PCA and enjoyed PCA specifically because they wanted to do cheerleading. So that's a major part of the identity of PCA and the member teams, because it is a Pride Cheerleading Association. So obviously cheerleading is a big part of that. Another one that I wanted to talk about specifically was that PCA and the member teams identify with the communities of your beneficiaries, right? So part of PCA's mission and goal is to raise money for LGBTQI based charities and to give back to the community via the beneficiaries, right? So for example, last year when we were in the Cincinnati Classic, we were giving back to the beneficiary Golden Rainbow, I think it was. And so the community that Golden Rainbow represents, I believe, which was, I want to say it was like HIV and AIDS support. So that the purpose or the organization that PCA is donating to helps to shape their identity, right? Because not only are you saying, okay, it's LGBTQI specific, but if it's impacting the HIV and AIDS community, or the homeless community, or the youth homeless community, or another community, right? Because there's lots of causes out there. There's lots of different ways that you can raise money to give back, to try and support people in need. So you do that obviously by finding organizations and beneficiaries that you can raise money for and help to get the word out there for. So that also becomes part of your identity, right? Because why did you choose this organization above all the other ones? And because it's related to who you are as an organization, as a member, as a team, and then as an individual, right? So those help to shape the identity of the organization itself and help to reflect what the missions and the values and the goals of the organization are. And then, of course, there's always others. There's always others. So maybe one thing you can do right now is to start to think about, when you look at all the different kinds of communities that PCA, that the member teams, and that you as an individual identify with, what are some other ones based on what I've already explained and what I've already talked about? What are some other ones that maybe that you identify with? Just take a few moments, maybe think about it, see what you can come up with. But in the meantime, we'll move on. So I want to talk about from the individual to the community and back. So what I mean is the road from one's own personal sense of identity. How does that personal identity influence your team, which influences your organization, which influences the community, and back, right? So organizations and communities are influential to support the common goals and collective actions that are relative to the people in which they serve. So like in the last slide, right, I talked about how the beneficiaries that PCA supports and raises money for, those are the people, the organizations and communities in which PCA serves. But those specific beneficiaries are reflective of the values, the goals, and the collective action relative to the people who make up PCA and make up the member teams, right? So obviously, like we said, PCA represents the LGBTQI community, or identifies with the LGBTQI community. So it makes sense then that as part of that identity, the beneficiaries would be focused on LGBTQI causes, right? And then from there, it could be unique to the individual. It could be the individual regions in which you come from, or maybe the personal experiences of the athletes and the members of the team, right? So for example, if the city that your member team exists in, I'm not going to name any cities because I don't know any facts about the specific causes, but any city, right? Every city has problems that they're known for, right? Like some cities are, known as the crack capital of the US, or, the homeless capital of whatever. So if your organization is within one of those cities, right, you say, okay, I, as a resident of the city who identifies as a member of this community, can see that this is our biggest problem. So then how can I, as an athlete, raise money to help fix this problem, right? So then for you say, okay, well, the biggest problem in our city is homelessness. So I'm going to recommend that our beneficiary, as a Pride Cheerleading Association member team, help to raise money for a charity that helps to support and help deal with the homeless crisis in that particular city, right? So you as an individual are influencing the goals and the collective action of your organization to help impact your community, if that makes sense, okay? And of course, like I said, it's all, there's so many different ways that identity wraps around this, right? So it's LGBTQI, it's physical location, it's, maybe even your own personal experience. One of my favorite interviews last year from when I was doing my video project on social identity in sport, which if you go back and watch that, you can actually see the interview. I can't remember the person's name though, but they talked about how I personally identified with the beneficiary that PCA was raising money for, right? Because they had their own experiences. I think they talked about how it was like a boys and girls club, but for LGBTQ people. And they said, well, for them, it was particularly important because they themselves had been involved and grew up going and attending boys and girls clubs or being part of that kind of organization. So for them, it was particularly important to be raising money for this particular beneficiary due to their own personal experiences and their own identity with an organization that had a similar mission in their own childhood, so that also influences the goals, the common goals, and the collective action, right? Because the individuals within that organization, based on their own personal experiences, are saying, hey, I was a part of this, or I experienced that, or I have a direct relationship with whatever this is. So now here's their opportunity to raise money to give back to the thing that they identify with, right? So that's where it's important to recognize that you as an individual help to shape your team and organization and ultimately your community, right? And it's the reverse. Individuals are shaped by the communities in which they identify with. And again, the communities are shaped by the individuals they're made up from. So it's a cyclical relationship, right? So yeah, as a member of the LGBTQI community, you might be shaped and influenced by the things that happen as part of the LGBTQI community, right? If you're going to bars or clubs, or you're getting involved with organizations like Pride Cheerleading Association, attending events like the Sin City Classic or gay games or something else, participation in Pride festivals and stuff like that. All of those things that for you as a member of the community that you identify with help to shape you as an individual, right? So you learn new things, you experience new things, either for the good or the bad. These are all experiences that you take from these participation within this community. And that helps to influence who you are as a person. So it's, things that you learn what to do, learn what not to do, learn just gathering experiences, all these things, right? And then in turn, that drives your individual thoughts and behaviors and actions and motivations and things like that, which then in turn, with the organizations and the teams and the communities in which you identify with and participate in, those help to influence the community. That makes sense? I hope so. Moving on. PCA member teams form a community that is driven by a common goal of charitable cheerleading. That supports the communities in which the PCA member teams are a part of, right? So, and I forgive if I've forgotten any of these member teams, but you have Cheer Tacoma, Cheer Portland, Cheer Seattle, Cheer SF, Cheer Los Angeles, Cheer Salt Lake City, Cheer Colorado, the Chicago Spirit Brigade, Cheer Austin, Cheer New York, Capital Cheer, Capital, is it Capital Storm? Storm Cheer? I really should have written these down. My apologies. So, but it's a lot of teams, right? And a lot of organizations all placed around the US. And hopefully in the future, we'll be expanding, but it represents not just PCA as a whole, but the specific, like I said, the specific communities that the PCA member teams are a part of. So whether it's the physical community, the social community, the beneficiaries community, or the members of community, right? The individual members that make up that team are representative of the communities in which PCA member teams serve. And of course, all driven by the common goal of charitable cheerleading, so that regardless of the location, regardless of the different ways that each individual and each member team identifies with, in the end, everybody's accomplishing the same mission and pursuing the same goal, right? Raise money to support your community through cheerleading, even if that takes any different shape or form with the individuals involved. All right, so as we move on, how do we understand identity? Okay, how does identity connect and shape who we are and vice versa? So in 1970, this guy named Tajfel came up with the social identity theory. And the purpose of this theory was to understand the psychology of intergroup relations, that is, who's in the in-group versus the out-group dynamics. In social identity theory, individuals categorize themselves regarding group membership That is, are you a member of the in-group or the out-group? And then define themselves in terms of that social categorization. Individuals seek to maintain self-esteem by positively identifying their in-group selves versus an out-group comparison, leading to a defined sense of we/us rather than I/me, right? And this ties in again with the theme of PCA's virtual summit, which is we is greater than me. We are talking about how does your identity as a member of an in-group versus an out-group bring you together. So instead of I/me becomes we/us. There's 3 elements to that. I've been in Germany for a while, so it's like, but it's, yeah, 3. 3 elements to that: the perceived stability of the group, the perceived legitimacy of an in-group's position in relation to other groups, and the perceived permeability of group boundaries. So we should talk about, though, what defines a group. If you ask any social psychology of this, it's a whole controversy. What's a group? For this purpose, a group is a function of any team, organization, or several members that all come together that form a community. People organize into groups. Groups can organize into teams. Teams organize into organizations. And organizations go on to form a community. Of course, it's not entirely hierarchical like that, but generally that's kind of how the flow goes. In the 3 key elements, again, perceived stability in the group, you want to talk about more stability equals less intra-group competition for superiority, and thus leads to higher group cohesion. So the more stable the group is, the less people within the group are trying to compete with each other to be better than the other. The less that there's competition, the more cohesive the group is as a whole. If you, after this presentation, if you also watch my presentation on performance anxiety, you will learn how group cohesion is important for building the social support which help individual members overcome performance anxiety and help with emotion regulation. So the perceived legitimacy of an in-group's position in relation to other groups. More legitimacy equals less intergroup competition for superiority, which again leads to higher group cohesion. High status groups are groups that define themselves based on status defining dimensions, right? So groups that, are successful in competition, they say, oh, we're the best. We're the best. We're so great. We're so fabulous. We're so wonderful because we're so cool and we won and blah, blah, blah. So that's a high status group. A low status group will embrace social creativity to define themselves on a status that is irrelevant to the dimensions that to maintain a positive outlook. So if a group, say, loses or doesn't win or has some other things, but it's still relatively cohesive, they might say, well, we may be low status, but we may not be the best, but we did play stronger than we did before. So they're a little more creative in being able to find ways to define themselves in a still positive manner, but that's important to help keep the group together. Okay. And then when you talk about the perceived permeability of the group boundaries, social mobility increases with permeability, where members of a low status group will try to move into a higher status group, right? Because yeah, you may not be the best and you play stronger than before, but sometimes we do love to win. And sometimes we do love to be in a group that wins. So if the group if it's easy to change, if it's easy for people to leave the group and join a new group, or easy for people to join your group, it becomes more permeable. And the more permeable the group, the less likely individuals are going to identify with that specific group, right? I know, for example, with PCA and the member teams, there's tryouts, right? Not everybody can join a PCA squad because you need to have a certain standard of safety in regard to performing stunts. You have to be able to execute certain skills. You have to be able to learn choreography. You have to be able to dance. You have to be able to do all these different things, right? So, and there's only so many slots and positions within a member team in which you can have only a certain number of group members, right? So tryouts are important because it's like, okay, well, we want people to join, but not everybody can join. So there has to be some kind of like exclusive standard that allows you to limit the permeability of the group. And as a result, then this would help to the people who become members of the group, the in group, they're more likely to identify with that group because the less permeability, the less permeable that group is, the more that the individuals are going to be able to stay in the group and to stick together and be part of the group for longer, which ultimately then increases their willingness to identify with that group. In turn, there's another theory called the self-categorization theory, developed by Turner in 1987. In contrast to the social identity theory, self-categorization theory looks into how it dives deeper into the dynamic workings of the self. So instead of talking about group dynamics, it's talking about how does the individual themselves decide how to form and become part of a group. For this, there's 3 insights. Social identity permits group behavior to occur. This ultimately leads to self-stereotyping of people who define themselves in terms of a particular social identity. That is, the person will identify with the values and the meaning of the category and strive to enact that meaning, right? So a person who joins a PCA member team will identify as maybe a cheerleader, right? Or maybe they identify with they want to raise money for charity, LGBTQ charity, or give back to their community in some way. Or, there's people who want to find just a sense of family or a sense of community in this regard, right? So they identify with the values and the meaning of that category, right? So for PCA, it's charitable cheerleading. So people who identify with that value of charitable cheerleading are going to be the ones who will want to identify themselves under that value. But it's also not just how you identify with the value and the meaning of the category, but if the individual is striving to enact that meaning, right? So you can't be a charitable cheerleader if A, you're not trying to raise money for charity, and B, if you're not cheerleading, So charitable cheerleading is not something that you could just say, oh, I'm a charitable cheerleader. You actually have to go out there and do it, right? You have to go and raise money. You have to go and cheerlead, and usually cheerleading, generally requires more than one person. I mean, one person can do it, right? But usually a bigger cheerleading group means more people involved, get to do cooler things like stunts, and you also get to have a more effective way of raising money, right? So the second insight is that the sense of self reflects the operation of a categorization process based on membership. Social identities are activated based on a categorization's fit and a person's readiness to use it. So again, going back to that first one at the same time, maybe somebody identifies with charitable cheerleading, but is that person actually do they have any experience with cheerleading? Do they, are they willing to learn how to be a cheerleader? Are they comfortable wearing the uniforms, or doing the things like going out there with a bucket and soliciting donations, right? So it has to fit within the person's own sense of self-categorization, but also the person's readiness to use it, right? So it's not easy to put on a cheerleading uniform and go out to the Las Vegas Strip and ask people for money, right? So you have to have a certain readiness to be able to do that. Thirdly, let's see here. Thirdly, shared social identity is the basis for mutual social influence. That is, people who perceive themselves to share group membership with others in each context are motivated to strive toward mutual agreement and coordinate their behaviors and activities that are relevant to that identity, right? So you want to, like I said, being a member, like being a cheerleader, right? You could do it by yourself, but it's a lot more fun when you have friends. And if you got a lot more friends, you can do a lot cooler stuff. So people who identify with the shared value of charitable cheerleading, they're going to be more likely to come together and find some kind of way that they can coordinate their behaviors and work together to achieve this common goal through charitable cheerleading, right? And this is literally the basis of how organizations like PCA are founded upon. So I think I had an interview with, I want to say, with one of the founders of Cheer SF. His name, yeah. And he talked about, he's like, I was a cheerleader and Gay Games was coming up and I wanted to do something to help prepare for Gay Games, and I wanted to do something to help raise money for my community and do it through cheerleading and do all these different things, right? So he started doing this themselves, and then he started to realize, oh, other people want to do this too. And other people want to do this too. So then they all came together and they said, oh crap, we really all are, we're on the same page and we all want to do this. So let's figure out how we can do this together. And that's how Cheer SF was started. And then that's how it expanded and grew, because people realized, oh, I see what they're doing. That's awesome. That's so cool. That looks like a lot of fun. I want to do that too. And more people come together. And then before you know it, you have a huge charitable cheerleading based group in San Francisco that eventually expands to Los Angeles and New York, and it just grows from there, and that's literally the basis of like what PCA is, what Gay Games is, what, like, literally name any organization or major community like this. This is exactly what happens. Yeah. Categorization is based on the influence essential to transformation of low-level individual inputs into higher order group products, right? So in this case, it's saying, okay, well, person wants to raise money for charity. That's a low-level individual input, right? Well, you categorize yourself as, well, I want to raise money for LGBTQ charities because I'm LGBTQ. Okay, great. So then you start to find other people that want to raise money for LGBTQ charities. And, oh, I identify as a cheerleader. Okay, well, I want to find other cheerleaders. Now I need to find other cheerleaders who want to raise money for LGBTQI charities, right? So the different ways that people categorize themselves based on their own identity in their own individual way is what helps to lead to higher order groups that emerge, right? And that's, like, again, this is how it's all started. A few people said, I'm a cheerleader, I'm LGBTQ, and I want to raise money for charity. How can I do that? Okay, well, let's start cheerleading and use that as a platform to raise money for LGBTQI charities, right? And then it just, grew from there. This way, this creates, sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself. So the third insight, I got so excited about that. I was like, oh, so the third insight is the shared social identity is the basis for mutual social influence. That is, this creates conduit between individual perception, action, behaviors, and organized collective behaviors. So again, people who identify as a cheerleader, people who identify as LGBTQ, people who identify as, I want to raise money for charity. These are all social identities that are shared among multiple people that ultimately bring together the group and influence each other, right? So LGBTQI cheerleader want to raise money for charity, right? And you say, okay, what are some issues that the LGBTQI community needs that we can raise money for? Well, there's HIV/AIDS, there's homelessness, there's trans healthcare, there's all these other things, right? So then it's like, well, what are those individuals that all come together to create this group based on a shared sense of social identity? How do they decide what kind of charity do they raise money for, right? And again, that's all based on maybe the identities of the individuals within that group. If a person says, hey, this particular kind of charity has important meaning for me, let's raise money for that. The group says, okay, let's do it. They do it. Okay, next year, now it's this, now it's that. And it's all consistent based on a mutual social influence with each other, right? And that's just groups working together, coming together, and making these decisions based on their individual perception, action, behaviors, and then how does that translate to organized collective behaviors. So the key point is, after all that, key point is, people's willingness to engage constructively with others and to respond positively to such engagement is structured by the self-categorization process. Okay. So, more takeaways, 4 key takeaways. And again, if you watched my social identity and sport video from my web show called Sports Psych and Stuff, I also examine these 4 takeaways here too. So, social identity in sport. Social identity is the basis for sports group behavior. Group membership helps to shape and internalize a person's sense of self. Self-definition varies as a function of the current social setting. Some settings, a person's sense of self is defined in terms of personal identity. Okay. For example, social identity is basis for sports group behaviors. So if you identify as a charitable cheerleading, chances are then you're going to do things that involve raising money for charity and cheerleading. Simple as that. Social identity is the basis for sports group formation and development. This helps to build and affirm meaningfulness in social identity, right? So it's one thing just to say, oh, I'm a member of the LGBTQ community. I identify as LGBTQ. Great. But what does that mean for you? A group member's sense of self helps to shape group identity. And if you've tried to, so if you looked at like the last 10 or 15 years of the LGBTQI community, right? And all of a sudden you start to realize, oh, shit, there's like a lot more letters to this alphabet, and there's a lot more flags popping up, and there's a lot more definitions of gender identity and of sexual orientation that I don't know or understand, or all these phrases or anything like this, all this craziness, right? These are all influenced by individuals who are discovering and trying to understand their own sense of self. And then in turn, they're taking that sense of self and as a member of the LGBTQI community are helping to shape the identity of the LGBTQI community. Okay. And again, for an organization like PCA, say you have somebody who is particularly affected by HIV and AIDS, who's a member of a specific team, right? Like could be any individual team, but a member says, you know what, I'm particularly affected by HIV and AIDS. Maybe we can raise money for HIV/AIDS charity, right? So that individual's personal connection with the HIV and AIDS community might influence the group identity by saying, hey, let's raise money for this specific organization that helps to cover this specific issue. Group cohesion has been shown to enhance performance and group success. Again, watch my workshop on performance anxiety because we will talk about that there as well. The more cohesive the group, the more everybody loves to, be together. And ultimately, the more successful the group is as a whole, whether you're competing in a competition or trying to get donations or trying to raise the spirits of the people at whatever event that you're cheerleading at, the more cohesive the group is, the more fun everybody has, and ultimately the more successful you are in whatever the goal is that you're trying to pursue. Depersonalization is the core process that binds group members together in terms of social identity that is shared with others. So if you look at any particular squad, team member team, or organization, you can list off a bunch of names of people, right? But that group is not known by that specific name. I always remember this. It was kind of funny because last year during the Sin City Classic, I was like talking, I think it was Sarah Toogood, and I love you, Sarah. Hi. Or was it Sarah or was it Leah? But anyways, it was like, oh, you got to talk to the Vals. Like there's 2 Vals, there's Valerie and Delina. And I was like, okay, well, all right, well, who are they and everything like that. But, it's funny because they were obviously referring to individuals, but those individuals were just members of the greater PCA group. And, but those Vals, Sarah, Leah, everybody else, we don't know I don't know them based on like, I don't know their group based on them, right? Like, you know, I know that Valina's Cheer Salt Lake and Valerie's I'm sorry, Valerie, I forgot which. I think you were Cheer Tacoma. I forget. I apologize. But anyway, so it's like I know you as a member of Cheer Salt Lake, or you know, Cheer San Francisco, or for Sarah for Cheer PCA, or not Cheer PCA, for PCA. Things like that. So and for everybody within that group, it's you know, you're known, your identity as a cheerleader, as a charitable cheerleader, your identity as a member of whatever member team it is, right? You know, so it's that depersonalization where everybody comes together, because you're not known as, oh, the Val cheer squad, or you're not known as, you know, Sarah's super cool fantastic, you know, cheerleading group. You know, it's always, you know, the team, the name of the team as a whole, that stands above and represents all the members within it, even if, you know, you're not going to go through and say, okay, this is, you know, Sarah's and Liz and Val's and Valerie's, you know, cheerleading group or whatever. It's just PCA or whatever the name of the cheerleading team is, right? So yeah, that's where depersonalization becomes a core process there. Social identity is a key motivator for continued group support. People, again, who identify with the organization continue to support the organization, and vice versa. This way, the group support from everybody within the you're more likely to support your teammates and your friends and the members of your community in this regard. And I've seen this all over social media, which I love. You know, even you know, somebody has you know, has a moment they want to celebrate, and I see all the comments from other PCA members saying, hey, congrats, yay, great job, you know, or you know, messages of support, which I think are really important. So I always love seeing that, which is good. And then finally, people with high levels of group identification are more likely to buy into the group, right? So you know, if you know, the more a person identifies with the group, the more they identify with you know, the mission of the group or the activities of the group, you know. So saying, hey, you know, like, we're going to organize a team that goes to gay games, okay, people are more likely to say, yes, I want to do that, I want to go there, because if they buy into the group and they identify with the group more, they want to be part of the group and they want to do things that the group does, right? So you want to have a strong sense of social identity among the group members, because they're more likely to buy into what the group does ultimately in the whole. All right, 2 more takeaways. Sorry, you got me all excited here. So, you know, got a lot to talk about. So the third takeaway, social identity is the basis for sport group support and stress appraisal. Primary stress appraisal, stressors in the environment that are in some way threatening to the sense of self and well-being, right? So this could be anything from, you know, performing on stage to you know, doing something for the first time, or, you know, seeing people that you've never met before, or, you know, stuff like that, right? That's a primary stressor. Secondary stressor, extent to which the social support is available to help. It's easier to overcome stressors when you got friends, family, people that can help you to go through them, right? So if there's, you know, if you don't have that support, it's more likely to be stressful. But if you do have the support, it's a little easier to overcome. This is based on one's own sense of self in relation to the environment and the group, right? So stressors are relative. What may be stressful for some might end up being like absolutely relaxing and absolutely nothing for others. You know, it's very unique to each individual based on their sense of self and the relation to the environment and the group. We are going to talk a lot about this. I mean, a lot about this in my workshop on performance anxiety. So like I've already mentioned like 20 times, when you're done with this one, go watch that one. Finally, the last takeaway here is that social identity is the basis for sports group leadership. And I wanted to, you know, highlight this picture of the fabulous Sarah Toogood, who is a strong leader within PCA. And she is responsible for me now talking, I think, for about 50 minutes or so. So if this workshop is going on a little long, she's responsible. No. I love you, Sarah. Anyway, so a leader embodies the meaningfulness of a group from its members that engenders fellowship from the group. So like I said, people who identify with the group are more likely to buy into what the group does. Well, what the group does is based on the leadership of whoever's leading the group, and that leader has to embody what the group values and represents. So the meaningfulness of the group from its members that engenders fellowship from the group. Leaders and followers come to see each other as part of a common in-group, cultivating a sense of we is greater than me, which is the theme of the summit. Thank you. Successful leaders strive to mobilize team members through consistent articulation of team values built around positive, distinctive, and enduring sense of team identity. So the more that people identify with and the more of a positive relationship they have with the group will help to enhance a leader's ability to mobilize the team members based around the articulation of team values that ultimately drive the mission, the group's goal, right? So you're more likely to go out and solicit donations, built around, with the common, if you see a leader doing it, right? And built around the identity of the team. Finally, confidence expressed by leaders into the team is a powerful determinant by success. So if the leader feels that is very confident that the team will be able to go out there and achieve its goals and pursue its missions and stuff like that, helps to motivate the members and individuals of the team to go out there and do that. And then ultimately, helps to determine if the group is successful or not. So one more thing to consider is that this doesn't just apply to the individual leaders of a group. It also applies to a group which takes a leadership role within the community. PCA is a group. It's a group of groups. PCA is a group of member teams that have the capability and often do serve as leaders for the various communities in which they identify with. Thus, PCA and its member teams are leaders within their communities because they go out there and serve as leaders which they identify with as a group to raise money, support their communities, and do all those things. So if you take exactly what I just wrote here and you think about that in terms of the group rather than the individual, it all applies on the same level. All right, finally, social identity within sport helps to offer insight and understanding for sport-related behavior that expands the concept of sport to enhance the human capacity for collective endeavors and create positive change within ourselves, each other, and the community. That was a lot. Yeah. Basically, what we want to understand is how does our individual identity helps to offer insight into why we do sports and why and how can people like athletes achieve so much more than what any individual might even be able to comprehend. You look at like all the best athletes in the world, right? Like look at Michael Phelps, look at Usain Bolt, look at Serena Williams, Simone Biles, Naomi Osaka. Yeah. All these like super awesome athletes, right? And you think, holy crap, how could they even do that? Like, that's just, and I mean, they're achieving things just on the individual level. Now imagine that same kind of accomplishment, but with a group. Holy crap, right? So the way that we identify within ourselves and within our groups helps to expand and enhance the capacity for humans, not just to achieve things well beyond our own, well beyond what we even think we're capable of as individuals, but as a collective to achieve things as a group that can create positive change and impact the world, impact our communities, impact each other on levels above any of us can even consider. And that's really powerful, really powerful. The idea of social identity and the behaviors that it engenders applies not just to the individuals that make up the group, but like I said, also within the groups, teams, organizations themselves within their communities. This is why I love working with PCA, and I'm very inspired by everything that all y'all do, because you have shown that the thousands and thousands and thousands, if not millions and millions and millions of dollars that PCA athletes, member teams, and the organizations all within the group have raised money for charities all over the world for the last, I don't know, like 45 years now. I mean, that is just insane. And that's a reflection of how the power of social identity can help influence the behavior of the individuals that come together for a common goal and collective endeavors that impact and have a positive impact on our community and the things that we do overall. That's really cool. So one message I want to leave you with, then something to think about, a couple questions. You don't have to answer to me. You don't have to tell anybody, just something to think about, keep in the back of your head. How does your individual sense of self help to shape the different groups and communities you identify with? In turn, how do these groups and communities help shape your sense of self? Something to think about. Finally, I already said finally. Thank you. So that's all I have for this presentation. I would love it if y'all would connect and stay in touch. And I would love to hear your thoughts on feedbacks. Maybe some things you liked, some things you didn't like, maybe help me improve, help me get better as a presenter, all these things. So feel free to connect with me on any of these platforms. You can find more information about the stuff that I am currently doing as well. I would say Instagram would probably be the best. For me, it's just the easiest as well. And then finally, my reference here, if you're interested, this paper is what I based literally this entire presentation off of. It's a really great read. Definitely goes into a lot more detail as well. Some solid research there. So if you want, definitely check that out as well. If you cannot find it, connect with me, reach out to me, and I'll send you the PDF. It'll be fabulous. And I am planning to be at the Sin City Classic in January 2023, and I hope to see you there. So, yeah, thank you again for for sticking around this long, and I will hopefully see you in January and enjoy the rest of the summit.